Good morning to you. You. Good morning to you. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles, and it is Thinking Thursday, where we are going to be reading from, good morning, where we are going to be reading from The Spirit of Justice by Dr. Jamar Tisby. Dr. Jamar Tisby also has two other books out that we also have. One is entitled The Color of Compromise, where his journey really first began into looking at white nationalism and white Christian nationalism and its history and how it has worked through the religious sector, including church. And then he also came back with another book entitled How to Fight Racism, which he also has a student version of that book. And now we are at The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. So good morning to those of you who are coming in. And we are looking at his section entitled White Lash and Counting the Cost, which we're seeing a whole bunch of that right now. Okay. We're seeing a whole bunch of that right now. And, every morning it looks like I'm going to have to just keep blocking people who come in who are not here to listen or to learn. And that's okay because I'm an educator, so I'm used to it. I've been in this field for 25 years. And so you win some, you lose some, but you keep teaching. So he's talking today in this section is called White Lash and Counting the Cost. And we're going to read the entire section. And then next week, hopefully, we'll be in chapter 2, which is entitled Becoming African American. He writes, in my first book, The Color of Compromise, I open with the story of Charles Morgan Jr. He was a young white lawyer in Birmingham when a white supremacist bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church and unalived 4 young girls, Carol Robertson, Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, and Addie Mae Collins during church on Sunday, September 15th, 1963. So as you can see, that anniversary of that bombing happened just last week before last. The next day, Morgan took to the podium at a meeting of the Young Men's Business Club of Birmingham and gave a shocking speech. Shocking coming from a white Southern man at that time. Who did it? Who threw that bomb? Morgan asked. The answer should be, we all did it. Every last one of us is condemned for that crime and the bombing before it and the ones last month, last year, and a decade ago. We all did it. Morgan was not speaking to a group of Ku Klux Klan members. The most strident pro-segregationist personnel were not in his audience. The members of this club were rising leaders in Birmingham who had made gestures at school desegregation and attempts to blunt the brutality of the infamous Eugene Bull Connor. These were the moderate, level headed, unity minded voices of reason in the city that he was speaking to. It would have been easy to condemn the white supremacist extremists alone for it. But Charles Morgan Jr. did something far more hazardous. He blamed, quote unquote, the good white people for their silence and inaction. He even included the good white Christians. It is all the Christians and their ministers who spoke too late in anguished cries against violence. What I did not write about in my first book was what happened after Morgan's speech. 4 young black girls had been unalived at church on Sunday, but instead of directing their ire towards white supremacists and rampant racism in the city, Morgan's listeners reserved so much of their anger for him and his family. The next morning at 5:30 a.m., Morgan received a call at his house. "Is the mortician there yet?" a voice over the phone asked. "I don't know any morticians," Morgan responded. "Well, you will when the bodies are all over your front yard." The caller hung up. Morgan received many more death threats, and his opponents even threatened his wife and young son. Within a few weeks, Morgan and his wife decided to leave the city permanently. Morgan had to close his law practice. He gave away his law books and furniture. Their son gave away his dogs. There was no way for us to remain in the city of which I had been a part, from which I had grown apart. Morgan went on to have a notable career in civil rights law. He helped represent Muhammad Ali when the champion boxer refused the Vietnam draft because of the principled opposition and religious beliefs. He sued to desegregate the University of Alabama, his own alma mater. As a leader in the American Civil Liberties Union, Morgan helped defend Julian Bond after the civil rights organizer was denied his seat in the Georgia legislature because of his anti Vietnam War stance. But Morgan would never again live in the city where he had so boldly denounced racism. This is a book about resistance to racism, but it's also about resistance to the resistance. It's about the backlash, some would call it white lash, that occurs every time a movement for racial justice begins to take place. It is not the mere presence of Black people that is the problem. It is Blackness that refuses to accept subjugation or to give up, wrote Carol Anderson in her book, White Rage. It's like a social version of Newton's third law. For every anti racist action, there will be an equal or disproportionate and opposite reaction. What happened to Charles Morgan Jr. and his family is an example of the backlash that's almost invariably befalls those who pursue the spirit of justice. Telling these stories of faith motivated resistance without also acknowledging the extent to which the forces of regression fight back would only be telling half truths. The full truth is that any substantive initiative for racial progress will face vocal or targeted or even violent obstruction. This happened after every revolt of enslaved persons. It happened after the Civil War and Reconstruction. It happened in response to the Civil Rights Movement. It happened in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial justice uprisings of 2020. Racial backlash follows every gesture toward racial justice. This is something that we need to be prepared for. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way in his final book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, a book that we've read before in our previous podcasts. He remembers that with each modest advance, the white population promptly raises the argument that the Negro has come far enough. Each step forward accents an ever-present tendency to backlash. And as you know, since November 2024, we have been in a constant backlash and pushback against progress. In the Bible, Jesus shares an illustration. He says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it?" He then explains the consequences for failing to anticipate the burden of an ambition. For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, "This person began to build and wasn't able to finish." Luke 14, verses 28 through 30. In a similar manner, saying that one is for racial justice without counting the cost is a recipe for retreating. Many people prematurely proclaim themselves allies and activists before considering what such stances may require of them. But even as the spirit of justice moves people to challenge existing norms that oppress and exploit, others will be moved to oppose those efforts. In every instance, some people will benefit from trampling the rights and denigrating the humanity of others. They will not surrender their power willingly. As I have written before, white supremacy never goes down without a fight. The stories in this book reveal the price of racial progress. People were whipped, limbs were cut from bodies, churches were burned down, property was stolen, some were fired from jobs, some were strung up from trees or burned alive, some were sold away from family members or unjustly imprisoned. Others simply had their good names smeared. While the methods of retribution may change, the principle remains. There is a steep cost for investing in racial justice. Most people are not willing to give up their comfort, their status, their time, or their treasure to truly devote themselves to the cause of racial justice. But as this book shows, there's always been a stalwart group of people who have been gripped by this spirit, who cannot and will not give up. To learn from them is to learn our own personal potential and power. Have you considered the price? Are you truly prepared to sacrifice as much or more than the people in this book? Count the cost before you claim to be inspired by the spirit of justice. Determined all over again. In her remarks at the grand opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, Myrlie Evers Williams confessed that she felt weary. She had already devoted long decades to overcoming racism, and now she looked upon a national landscape that seemed mired in the same injustices she had faced her whole life. People today may likewise feel deflated at the lack of racial progress. The international uprisings in support of justice that held so much promise in 2020 seemed to evaporate as the calendar turned from one year to the next. Police brutality continues to trample over Black life in events as routine as traffic stops. Voting rights, the forefront of the civil rights movement more than half a century ago, are nearly as in peril now as they were then. A resurgence of white Christian nationalism, an ethno-cultural ideology that uses Christian symbolism to create a permission structure for acquiring political power and social control, proudly displayed its willingness to destroy democracy on January 6, 2021. We might echo Myrlie Evers Williams' understated sentiment. We are a bit weary. Despite acknowledging the feeling of exhaustion, Evers said she became determined all over again to continue the struggle for freedom. However, she heard the bell of freedom and rose to face the battle against racism once again. You have access to the same determination and gumption that characterize every historical figure who dared to fight against this evil. You can also resolve to move forward amid opposition. Let these stories of faith and resistance inspire you to draw on the spirit of justice as you continue the struggle for justice today. All right. And so we'll be moving into chapter 2 next week. Again, we are reading from Jamar Tisby's book, The Spirit of Justice. I want you to think about that on today. We have several things that are happening in our country. We talked about two of the things that are happening right now with ethnic intimidation. And I came back this morning on my Facebook page, Black Table Talk, and I wanted to say again that if you are a parent of a college student, make sure you're having a conversation, make sure you're having a talk as we start to see this rise again of ethnic intimidation, of people trying to come into spaces to intimidate Black people. um, that they have been, egged on and encouraged in this behavior from the highest offices in the land. But make sure that you're having a conversation about what to do if they are accosted, who should they contact, make sure they know their legal rights surrounding this thing, because I don't see it stopping for the foreseeable future, only because, again, there has been a permission slip given for this kind of behavior to go on and operate right now. The other piece is making sure that you know how to stay safe and you know how to keep your own self safe. Um, Again, you have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to defend yourself, even if your government is not doing so. You still have that legal right. So make sure that you are doing what is necessary to take care of yourself. I want to also open up another book today, and we'll be reading from this periodically. I'm going to be reading from it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I want to introduce the book to you today, and that is Reparations, a Christian Call for Repentance and Repair. So let's get into it. This book is by Duke Elquan and Gregory Thompson. It is a collaborative work. And interesting enough, they open up with a quote from Martin Luther King at the front. The real cost lies ahead. And if you want to deepen your own reading and reflection on the issues that are being raised in this book, they do have a study and discussion guide for either individual or group use, and it can be found at www.reparationsproject.com. And I'm going to make sure that I go and download it. The introduction here, generations without recompense. So we're going to try to get through some of the introduction. It is quite long. Yeah, it's 28 pages long. So we're going to just start part of it today. All right. An overdue response. On August 7th, 1865, former slave Jordan Anderson sat at a table in his Dayton, Ohio home and dictated a letter to his former owner, Colonel Patrick Anderson. Jordan was purchased as a boy by the colonel's father, General Paulding Anderson, to be a personal enslaved person and playmate for the general's young son, Patrick. It was a good investment. Years later, as the Civil War approached, Patrick owned not only Jordan, but also his wife, Amanda, and their children. But like many enslaved persons, Jordan Anderson saw himself and his family not as resources to be exploited, but as human beings to be honored. And so in 1864, with the help of Union soldiers and after some 30 years of bondage, Jordan Anderson and his family escaped to freedom. 1 year later, shortly after the end of the Civil War, learning of his former enslaved person's whereabouts, Colonel Anderson wrote to Jordan and requested his return. Lamenting that his 1,000-acre estate was faltering and confessing his desperate need for Jordan's help with the coming harvest, Colonel Anderson promised that if Jordan returned, he would treat him kindly. The request of the former master was audacious. The reply by the former enslaved person, Jordan, was masterful. Here it is. Dayton, Ohio, August 7th, 1865. To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Spring, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter and was glad to find that you had not forgotten Jordan and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anybody else can. I've often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you long before this for harboring Rebs they found at your house. I suppose they never heard about your going to Colonel Martin's to unalive the Union soldier that was left by his company in their stable. Although you shot at me twice before I left you, I did not want to hear of your being hurt and am glad you're still living. It would do me good to go back to dear old home again and see Miss Mary and Miss Martha, Ellen, Esther, Green, and Lee. Give my love to them all and tell them I hope we will meet in the better world, if not in this. I would have gone back to see you all when I was working in the Nashville hospital, but one of the neighbors told me that Henry intended to shoot me if he ever got a chance. I want to know particularly what the good chance is you propose to give me. I'm doing tolerably well here. I get $25 a month with victuals and clothing. I have a comfortable home for Mandy. The folks call her Mrs. Anderson. And the children, Millie, Jane, and Grundy, go to school and are learning well. The teacher says Grundy has a head for a preacher. They go to Sunday school, and Mandy and me attend church regularly. We are kindly treated. Sometimes we overhear others saying, them colored people were slaves down in Tennessee. The children feel hurt when they hear such remarks, but I tell them it was no disgrace in Tennessee to belong. Many darkies would have been proud, as I used to be. Now, if you will write and say what wages you will give me, I will be better able to decide whether it will be to my advantage to move back again. As to my freedom, which you say I can have, there is nothing to be gained on that score, as I got my free papers in 1864 from the General Marshal of the Department of Nashville. Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send us our wages for the time that we served you. 30 years. This will make us forget and forgive old scores and rely on your justice and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 32 years and Mandy 20 years. At $25 a month for me and $2 a week for Mandy, our earnings would amount to $11,686. Add to this the interest for the time our wages have been kept back and deduct what you paid for our clothing and 3 doctor's visits to me and pulling a two for Mandy, and the balance will show what we are in justice entitled to. Please send the money by Adams Express in the care of V. Winters Esquire, Dayton, Ohio. If you fail to pay us for faithful labors in the past, we can have little faith in your promises in the future. We trust the good Maker has opened your eyes to the wrongs which you and your fathers have done to me and my fathers, in making us toil for you for generations without recompense. Here I draw my wages every Saturday night, but in Tennessee there was never any payday for the Negroes any more than for the horses and cows. Surely there will be a day of reckoning for those who defraud the laborer of his hire. In answering this letter, please state if there will be any safety for my Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good looking girls. You know how it was with poor Matilda and Catherine. I would rather stay here and starve and die, if it came to that, than have my girls brought to shame by the violence and wickedness of their young masters. You will also please state if there has been any schools open for the colored children in your neighborhood. The great desire of my life now is to give my children an education and have them form virtuous habits. Say howdy to George Carter and thank him for taking the pistol from you when you were shooting at me. From your old servant, Jordan Anderson. Thanks to the efforts of abolitionist Valentine Winters, Jordan Anderson's letter was reprinted in the Cincinnati Commercial, the New York Daily Tribune, and Lydia Maria Child's The Freedman's Book, and became something of a national sensation. Rightly so. It is at once satirical and serious, compassionate and candid, vulnerable and shrewd, personal and prophetic. Indeed, it is difficult to read this letter without being led in the span of but a few sentences to both laughter and tears. Perhaps the most important aspect of this letter is the light it sheds on what is at the heart of this theme, reparations. Jordan Anderson's letter was fundamentally a call for his former master, one who had long benefited from his unpaid labor, to begin the work of repair. So, this nonsense of people not knowing that they were owed repair is ahistorical, and we encourage you to read more letters from the formerly enslaved. This book is a long overdue response to Jordan Anderson's letter, a response that seeks to engage seriously with his essential theme. Reparations. All right. So those are the two books that we're going to be reading for Thursdays. I hope you have enjoyed what we have read thus far. Pastor Ben, I do not see you on here. I don't see any comments. So I'm not sure if you're on here or not. But let's see. Let's see what comments I do have. Dutch Haircut says, I don't take on a label. I was taught to respect others and treat them as I would want to be treated. And I will do that to the best of my ability as long as I'm on this earth. I kind of feel the same way. I don't really like labels. A lot of things. So it's hard to define me. But the main label that I appreciate is human being. And so I find a lot of people skip past that one to go to the other labels so they can figure out how to divide and how to alienate and how to isolate and how to hate. So my first question is always to anyone that I encounter is, are you a human being? And what kind of human being are you? Are you a human being that honors and respects other human beings? If you are, then we'll get along. But if you are a human being that disregards, disrespects, and dehumanizes other human beings, then we're probably going to have a problem, because I feel like that's the baseline. And I feel like a lot of people have forgotten the baseline, that we're all human. I might not like the way someone dresses, right? I might not share the same kind of experiences around sexuality. I might not. I might not share the same faith practices. But if you're a human being and I'm a human being and you can honor that, then we can have a meeting ground. And what I'm finding is people who cannot honor basic humanity, we don't have a meeting ground. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. And there are a lot of people who forget that we're all human, you know. So if we think about the topic of reparations, that's kind of sort of what the letter that he is writing to his old master is all about. You treated us like we were just like the cows. You treated us like property, like we didn't have any value, like we didn't deserve to be paid for our labor because you didn't see us as human. So how can you possibly be asking us to come back into a space to work for you and you'll treat us kindly? He didn't say, come back and work for me and here's the wages I'm going to pay you, right? In that letter. He just said, I need you to come back because my 1,000 acres is going to ruins. There was no promise there. And so that particular letter is often used as a way to share with people and validate that, yes, enslaved persons knew that they were being wronged, they're being treated wrongly, and they wanted redress, they wanted reparations. And so that idea should not come as a surprise in 2025 that the descendants are still wanting reparations because ain't nobody paid. Ain't nobody paid. And so America can keep going as long as it possibly can, but I don't know how much longer it's going to possibly be able to go on when they have a debt, when America has a debt over its head, not just financial. We're talking about a cosmic debt over their head because they won't look their evil in the face, acknowledge it, and address the cosmic debt that they have yet to pay. And when you're not addressing your cosmic debt, guess what? Other nations around the world start looking at you as a weakness because you're not addressing your cosmic debt. And most people with any kind of spiritual sense knows that when you are not addressing your cosmic debt, you are in a vulnerable position. Germany, Germany is addressing its cosmic debt with what happened in their country. France, France is starting to experience the downside of their cosmic debt because they're yet another nation that after all they did to Haiti, they still don't want to address their cosmic debt. So now they're starting to see the results of that. So that's my take on that. I feel like labels can sometimes obscure the basic practice of humanity and honoring humanity that we're supposed to have for everybody. So on that, I think I agree with you, Dutch haircut. All right. I do not see Pastor Ben here today, so we're going to end. And this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you for your time and your attention. Oh, there you are. Have you been on today listening? I don't want to just pop you on and make you talk and have you talk. Um, so if you got a chance to listen to today's broadcast, I will send you the link. I'm waiting for your second response. I want to put you on the spot. Have you got a chance to listen to today? Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, we're gonna close out. I think because this is a shorter broadcast, YouTube may be allowing our broadcast to finally not have to wait 24 hours to be examined under a microscope before they let it play. So this one may show up right after we end. If not, it'll show up tomorrow morning. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Take care, everyone. Be well. And most importantly, be light. Peace out.